Hi, my name is Thomas Kennedy,
And I'm Gavin Benson.
and we did our esports presentation on fantasy esports. So, what is fantasy esports? It's when you select a virtual team from a pool of potential real life players and compete against other people's teams picks. Based on the real life performance of the selected players, your team earns points, and then they're compared to other players' teams, determine the winner. It's very similar to fantasy football or fantasy basketball, if anybody's familiar with that, and where individuals score points and they get fantasy points, and you play against other individuals. The estimated number of DFS players, which is daily fantasy sports, um, by 2020 was already over 45 million. So it's clearly growing and will continue to grow even further.
So, what is daily fantasy sports? Daily fantasy sports are contests played across a shorter period of time than regular fantasy sports. Usually, a fantasy league in both sports and esports may last an entire competitive season, while the daily esports fantasy system instead focuses on a single competitive weekend or session. Daily fantasy sports is an ideal for players that want their contest done and dusted within days, so they're not lasting a couple weeks. Where most seasons of like NFL or NBA, you're gonna have a 5 or 6 month period where you're doing fantasy every week and you're not getting paid out as much. Also, daily fantasy games are commonly played subject to entry fees and have prize pools based on said entry fees.
So there's many places you can play fantasy esports. The main one that offers tournaments and free bets and everything is DraftKings. That's the most popular. But you see, there's also other sites like FanDuel, Thrive Fantasy, ESL Fantasy, Strafe, Super Draft, Fantasy LCS, and Alpha Draft. And that's just a few to name. There's so many more. And I guess there will be a continued growth in that area since fantasy esports is growing so heavily. Some examples of games where you could play fantasy esports include League of Legends, which is very popular, Valorant, Call of Duty, CSGO, and Rocket League. And there are many more games that will be added to this list in just a few months, maybe even years.
So to go on a scoring system for one of these games to kind of introduce you to how this might work. So you get a total salary for each game that you're going to do fantasy in. So for Rocket League, the salary is going to be $9,000. There's a total of 6 players that you can pick from. So you have a total of 6 players on your team. Each player will have a set salary value that will be taken from your total if picked. So all 6 players can only total up to 9,000. Each team will consist of 2 strikers that get boosted points for goals, 2 midfielders that'll get boosted points for assists, and 2 defenders that get boosted points for saves. So you can pick any 6 players and you can pick the position you put them in. So depending on what player may save more goals in the game, you can decide to put them at defender just so your team's getting a little more points.
So for the League of Legends scoring system, it's very similar to the Rocket League system. Each participant starts with a fixed budget. There's a purchase value, and obviously, the better the player, the higher it costs. So in the bottom right, you can see a kill for League of Legends is worth 3, a death is -3, assist 1.5, first blood 7. And the list continues, but different characters get different amounts of points, and it's very similar to different games. So, in conclusion, fantasy esports offers a unique and engaging way for fans to interact with their favorite games and players. So, we've explored some of how the esports platforms work, the popular games that are available, and the strategies for success. Um, Participation in fantasy esports fosters community engagement and enhances understanding and enjoyment for the esports industry. It makes it way more exciting to watch tournaments and different games. And as the esports industry continues to grow, fantasy esports presents exciting opportunities for players, fans, and investors alike. And here are references. Thank you for watching, and I hope you learned more about fantasy esports.